All right, we are live. And I am going to start letting folks in from the waiting room. Thank you all so much for being here. We are going to get started at 6, but for now, take a minute, get yourself a glass of water or whatever you need to do before then. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening on this brisk fall day. All right, thank you all so much for being here on this beautiful Thursday evening to begin the work of our diocesan convention. Some folks are still coming in, so I think we might give it a couple more minutes. But we are very happy you are all here to participate in the work of convention. All right. Thank you again all for being here this evening. We're just gonna give it one more minute to wait for folks to join us. Uh, and then we will get started. Again, thank you all for joining us to begin and do the work of this convention. All right. Seeing it as it is 6:05, Paul, would you like to do you think we should get started? You are still muted.
I suspect so. I would like to just turn things over to the bishop to provide a welcome and a prayer to center us.
I'm waiting for Sophie to take the sign off. All right, thank you. So good to see your faces, and thank you for this time to gather as a diocesan household. God be with you. Let us pray. Oh God, you manifest in your servants the signs of your presence. Send forth upon us the spirit of love, that in companionship with one another, your abounding grace may increase among us. through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. This is a reading from the second chapter of Acts. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and their prayers. Awe came upon everyone, because many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Yeah.
The word fellowship in Greek is koinonia, and you all will get tired of me saying that. You've heard it plenty of times. But anyway, the concept of koinonia encompasses the many acts, tasks, work, and ways of being necessary for people to be a community of followers of Jesus. This pre-convention meeting to discuss various aspects of our governance is part of the fellowship we promise to participate in our baptismal vows. With that in mind, let us all listen and speak respectfully and openly so that we can attend to the task at hand, the ordering of our lives together, so that we may faithfully carry out God's mission. May our work be done in the thriving spirit of koinonia. And one last prayer for good measure. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, you declare your glory and show forth your handiwork in the heavens and in the earth. Deliver us in our various occupations from the service of self alone, that we may do the work you give us to do in truth and beauty and for the common good, for the sake of him who came among us as one who serves, your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen. So tonight, we are here for this pre-convention hearing, which is a required session of diocesan convention. We're here, the purpose of this meeting is to introduce the nominees, resolutions, and the 2026 budget that we will be considering at our business session later this month. Tonight is a time for questions and clarification. This is a time when people may get the notion that they might like to make an amendment to a resolution. Yes, this is the time to make those thoughts. And if you have an amendment you would like to propose, not right now, but please be in touch with Ann Brown of the Resolutions Committee as soon as possible after this hearing. And please do not wait until we begin the business session on October 30th. Our canons do allow us to bring amendments to the floor of convention, the business session. But in the spirit of being good stewards of everyone's time, please do so before we arrive for business on the night of voting. This will help us save and respect people's time. This is our work to do together as a diocesan household. The diocese isn't the people that sometimes gather in this building or that are scattered around in other places. It's not my staff. The diocese is all of us. Each congregation elects delegates to participate in the decision-making that gives direction to our shared ministry. The decisions we make are for the flourishing and strengthening of our diocese so that we can engage in God's mission in the world. The bulk of the decisions we make at convention are then passed on to the Executive Council to see that they are carried out. Other decisions are carried out by committees and commissions. As we consider the 2026 draft budget being presented by Executive Council, please keep in mind, a budget is a guide for how we will allocate our resources to carry out our mission. It is also a moral document and communicates who we are and what we value. We all want to be good stewards of our financial resources. And so This is part of the work that we're doing to steward that together. But I also want to say thank you to the Executive Council, the Commission on Finance, and my staff for your work with the interim CFO, Mike Shapiro, in developing and approving this budget being presented tonight. Thank you to our Chancellor, Tom Little, and the Canons Committee, and to Anne Brown, who have worked to bring us amendments to our canons, the collection of written church laws that govern our structure, discipline, and worship. And then I'd like to now turn things over to Paul Olson, who is the chair of our Dispatch of Business and Secretary of Convention, and Anne Brown, who is the chair of the Resolutions Committee, and will be presenting the resolutions, and Paul will guide us in our conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Shannon. I would just like to reiterate that this is a wonderful opportunity tonight as we gather together to have a chance to really discuss and find out more about the various resolutions. If there are questions, queries, clarifications you need to better understand the business that will come before us at the business session, tonight is your opportunity to really have those points taken and questions answered. So please do avail yourself of this opportunity tonight. Sophie, I wondered if you might give us some instruction as to what we can expect in terms of the rest of this gathering and how we will proceed technologically.
Happily. All right, I am going to just 1 second. All right. All right, good evening, everyone. As I have said a few times already this evening, it is such a pleasure to be with you, all of you here tonight. We are just going to do a quick Zoom orientation. I know that all of us are probably much accustomed to Zoom at this point, but it's always good to have a little reminder, particularly as we come into a convention where some of these functions will be very, very critical. If you wish to ask a question or speak tonight, you're going to have to do so using the raise hand function. Myself and Paul will be working together to identify who is speaking based off of whose hand was raised first. Luckily, it saves the order, so you do not have to keep raising your hand. We've got our eyes on you. But if we could all just please take a second and practice raising our hands. All right, awesome. You guys have done all right, we are doing really well. If you have not if you have raised your hand, feel free to put it down. It looks like we're all good and ready at raising hands. Once you are called on, you will be asked to unmute yourself, and then you will have to just click the little button that says that accepts that invitation, and you will then be able to speak. That is sort of the main uh, reason we will be using the raise hands function on the night of the convention. If you wish to speak to a resolution or to a motion, that is also, or make a motion, that is also how you will have to do it. We also will, the chat function is open and available. It is important for our business here that we do not use the chat function for the actual business of convention. If you wish to speak if you wish to speak something, please make sure you are raising your hand, as debate in the chat will not be recognized as such. If we will also be using the chat on the night to remind you to distribute and remind you of our different resources and materials for this convention, all available on our diocesan website at diovermont.org/diocesan convention 2025. That link will be in the chat momentarily.
do see someone who has raised a hand. Denny
Yes.
Hawksworth. Is there a question that you wish to bring up?
Uh, uh, all right. The other main function of Zoom that we will be using is Zoom polls, but we are going to wait to talk about that until later this evening when we will go over our voting procedures. Uh, and I think that's all from me for now.
Great. Thank you, Sophie. Um, with that done, I'd like to turn things over to the Chancellor of the Diocese, Tom Little, to give us a little introduction to the rules of order that are being proposed for this particular convention.
Thank you, Paul, and good evening, everyone. The rules of order that will be proposed for voting at the beginning of the business session are the same as they have been in recent years, and most of them for much longer than that. We have been using a special rule of order, it's number 7, to address rules and procedures for holding a remote diocesan convention, and uh, Rule of Order 7 addresses all of those things. Uh, that rule of order has worked well in the past. One comment about uh, voting, just to keep uh, us all on our toes, is that when we do come up for a vote on the changes proposed for the canons, those will be votes by orders. And the first time around, that often is a bit strange, if not clunky, but you'll get the hang of it pretty quick. And our team here has got some good experience at presenting those and processing those. The rules of order, when adopted, limit debate on each resolution or question on the floor to not more than 20 minutes after the presentation has been made. And then speakers are limited to 2 minutes or not more than 2 minutes, with no one speaking a second time until all others have spoken for a first time. So the rules are the same as they have been for the last few years. They've worked well. Please read them over before we do the business session, and I'll defer back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Tom. Our first topic for this evening is to have a presentation on the proposed budget for the coming year, and would like to introduce a video that we have that gives a financial report from our interim CFO, Michael Shapiro. And he will be available at the end to tell us more or answer any questions that may come up as a result.
Hello. Special thanks to those who worked on the assembly and review of this budget, including the bishop and her staff, Commission on Finance, and Executive Council. I will be moving somewhat quickly through these slides. My goal is to leave you with a high-level understanding of our 2026 budget. Further information is available digitally. A balance sheet represents a snapshot in time of our financial position. It provides a view of what we own and what we owe. It is a nice starting point before we consider 2026. Shared here is a summarized balance sheet as of June 30, 2025, and a comparable view as of June 30, 2024. Key takeaways include no real debt, a healthy cash reserve, And I'll also highlight that the decrease in total assets from one year to the next is due largely to our accounting policy of not capitalizing fixed assets, including building improvements. As our liquidity decreased, our fixed assets would have risen in 2024 and 2025 as we took on some major projects. Our partners at Raymond James provided me this slide. The graph illustrates the growth in green of our collective unit fund over the past 20 years. Also noted over the past 20 years are our contributions, as shown in blue. As our contributions have declined, our fund has continued to grow. This is certainly a product of the market, but also reflects the stewardship across the household preserving this critical asset. We are presenting a balanced budget for 2026. The budgeted expenses align with the budgeted revenue. A budget is an educated guess at what will happen in the coming year. Some organizations budget too aggressively, others too conservatively. This budget represents the right balance. The biggest risk is the unforeseen, especially relating to building repairs. The biggest opportunity is in our funding. Our budgeted revenue for 2026 is not wishful. It is based on what we know and can reasonably expect. This slide presents a summarized but full picture of our 2026 income statement. We will be reviewing the revenue and expenses on the next two slides, so I am going to move quickly. This view just shows how it all fits together. Four main sources of revenue: assessments from parishes, investment dividend income, grant income, and our annual appeal. Among our expenses, which is always a combination of our fixed operating expenses, what it costs to run a diocese, and also the diocese's spend on household-wide initiatives. I will end this presentation with a slide that highlights the latter. This slide illustrates that we expect to record a loss in 2025. This is mainly driven by our capital projects over the last 18 months, including a necessary HVAC upgrade. You can see this spend in the other expense line. I'll highlight a couple of more items among our expenses. Our spending on staff remains constant. Our legal expense embedded within general and administrative is increased in 2026, not due to any knowns, but to mitigate what has felt like a risk in our budget in recent years. Our buildings and land has an increase from 2025 to 2026. We don't yet have a full comprehensive view on what the HVAC upgrades will do to our utility bills, so hopefully there is a bit of a buffer in here. Within our reserves accounts, we work hard to save funds for significant spending that is not annual. An example of this is our attendance at General Convention every 3 years. We do this so that we do not take the full hit to our financials in any one given year. It's spread out. This line represents a lot of shifting between individual reserve accounts that I won't get into detail here. Overall budget for 2026 nets out to zero. We are budgeting to spend what we have. We talked about this in our prior slide, but this is a graphical view of our 2026 funding sources. 58% from parish assessments, 31% from investment dividends, 9% of miscellaneous led by grants reliably secured in our past, 2% from our annual appeal. A good budget presentation highlights where the funding comes from, which is what this slide attempts to do. It also highlights where the funding is being used, which takes us to our next slide. It is hard to take in all that this slide offers, so I will highlight the following. Approximately half of our spend is on our people. The rest, as noted earlier, captures the cost of our diocese office operating and the spend that is made for the benefit of the wider diocesan household. More on that to come. I've shared this slide for a couple of years of doing this, and there are two interesting takeaway conclusions. One, the diocese has maintained steady spend across personnel for at least the last several years. And two, The diocese continues its intentional trend toward reducing the reliance on contracted staff in favor of hired employees. I've spoken today about our expenses and how they can be roughly segmented into two buckets. One, what it costs us to operate a diocese, our utilities, our insurance, our bookkeeping, and so on. And second, what is spent to support the parishes and clergy of our diocese. This graphic highlights in yellow the portions of our expense budget that contribute to what is being spent to support the parishes and clergy of our diocese. Lines highlighted include personnel, the direct support that is provided by the staff, formation and mission, often annual decisions. These will change annually, but often are geared towards clergy support, parish programs, other trainings and support. Our bishop's discretionary spend, certain unit fund dividends that are purposely restricted to support aged and infirmed clergy, campus ministry, and additional seminarian support. The grants that we award directly to parishes, loans available to, but not included in this line, and other expenses, which for 2026 includes continued support for Mission Farm in the amount of $50,000. That is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I imagine questions that might be raised about the budget could come up as part of the discussion of the resolution that will be used to adopt the budget. Which means I can turn things over to move on to the topic of resolutions that'll be coming before us at the business session, to Ann Brown, who chairs our resolutions committee, and ask her to introduce us those resolutions that will come before us.
Thank you, Paul. As chair,
Anne, you're muted. I apologize.
thought I undid it.
There you
Okay.
go.
Did anything come through or no? So as chair of the resolutions committee, I'll be introducing the resolutions on which we expect to take action October 30th. All of them are on the website, and Sophie described how to find them and put the link in the chat. One thing you can do is look more frequently than just once, because some have been posted there for more than a week, others recently. Do check and read them, and check for updates as we near October 30th. For those of you who are new to the resolution process, note that each resolution, and you'll see them when Sophie posts them, has resolved clauses. Those state what the convention is being asked to do. And then these are followed by an explanation section, some more full than others. We vote only on the resolution itself. The explanation is intended as helpful background to provide resources. So remember that as you think about how you're going to proceed with voting and listening to people's presentations. For each resolution, I'll speak briefly and then introduce people who can tell us more and also be available to answer your questions. As Bishop Shannon has said, we hope you will use this time to ensure that you understand what you will be asked to vote on in 2 weeks and to pose any questions you may have in this less formal setting. It will help move things along smoothly when we are operating within the more formal rules of order. Also, each resolution has the name and email address of at least one contact person. So if you find you have questions in the interim between now and then, please feel free to contact them by email, and especially if you think your question that might come up tonight or come up later doesn't need to take the time of the full group. We have 9, possibly 10 important resolutions this year. So it's my fervent hope that the work we do tonight will help us avoid a marathon session on the 30th. Some of you may remember we've had one of those. So there are ways that we can move quickly and get ourselves through it as best we can without avoiding serious questions or concerns. Before we move on to the discussion of this year's resolutions, I do want to report progress on some adopted in previous years that have led to this year's resolutions. Phasing out fossil fuels by 2030 was the topic of a 2020 resolution that was something of a victim of the COVID pandemic. Phil McVeigh picked up the challenge in 2024, and a group formed after Diocesan Convention. It became named the Zero Emissions Task Force, and they will present a new resolution this year. The 2021 convention adopted a resolution formalizing a strategic task force on financing and governing strategies that issued its Thrive report to the diocese in the summer of 2022. Ultimately, that year's convention voted significant changes to the diocesan canons. These are due to sunset this year, as you will hear, and we've lived with the changes since. We've made some additional adjustments in 2023, and this year, as Bishop Shannon will explain, a resolution will ask for some further adjustments as well as eliminating the sunset provisions. Finally, the 2024 convention asked the Executive Council to establish a task force on becoming a sanctuary diocese. This year, we will consider a resolution from that group that will allow the continuation of both the task force and its timely and important work. And you'll hear about that later. Now, on to tonight's opportunity to discuss the resolutions on which you'll vote. Please use the raised hand function, as Sophie said, if you wish to speak. And Paul and Sophie will call on you in the order in which you appear. Our first resolution is the adoption of the fiscal year 2026 budget for the Diocese of Vermont. This is the resolution that approves the budget presented by CFO Mike Shapiro, and he is available to answer any additional questions or any questions, since you hadn't had an opportunity to ask them before, but any questions you may have tonight. And if there are any, raise your hand. All right, I guess we can move on. Wonderful. The next resolution is one establishing minimum clergy compensation for 2026. We're required by the canons to set a minimum level of compensation for clergy that includes stipend, housing, and other benefits and reimbursements. It also sets the annual cost of living increase for all employees, clergy and lay. The Reverend Canon Linda Grentz, who is staying up quite late because I believe she's in a different time zone, will respond to your question.
Thanks, Anne. I just want to do one clarification. This is pretty much what we had last year. There are no significant changes other than a COLA. I will explain that we've made a clarification on the $500 merit pay increase. And that is just to make clear that after you've established your minimum, as you've come in and started a new job, you get $500 each year, not $500 times years of service, because then somebody who had served for 20 years would get a $10,000 raise every year, and that would bankrupt all of our churches. So we've simply clarified that language. Does anyone have a question about clergy compensation and lay compensation? benefits. I see Rachel Field has her hand up. Well, and then disappeared.
Okay, now I've unmuted. I was waiting to be allowed to unmute. Sorry. My question is about the number for the hourly work for clergy. I think it was a range of 25 to 35. I'm curious where that number came from.
It has been one that we've carried forward for a number of years. I don't know when it was last increased. Before my time. Any other questions? Please do feel free to contact me if you're negotiating a letter of agreement with the priest, or even if you have questions about lay employees, I'm happy to help with that. Anne, back to you.
Thank you very much, Linda. We have 3 revisions to the canons, our governance document. This year we have put the canons resolution explanation. When you look at these resolutions, this is a new thing we've done. We've put the explanation sections between the resolution and the actual portions of the canons document being amended. This is both to make it easier to find the explanation, because sometimes these can be fairly lengthy, and to help understand what's being proposed. The key thing is that we do not vote on the explanation. So when we do get to vote on these things, you'll vote the resolution itself and then also the presentation of the canons that are being amended. So I just wanted to make that clear, but we felt it would be easier to figure out what you're looking at if you start out with the explanation. So I'd like to introduce Tom Little, who is going to be actually appearing in a video to give you an overview of the canons revisions.
I am so sorry to say, Anne, that we are actually going to hear from the bishop about the work done on Thrive first, and then move into the canons.
Oh, okay. I was going to put her later. Okay, good, fine.
Yes.
However.
Sorry about that, Anne. Yeah, a little.
No, that's okay.
Okay. All right. So at convention in 2022, we adopted experimental canons based on the recommendations of the Task Force for Hope, Revitalization, Innovation, Vitality, and Efficiency. And that is where we get the acronym THRIVE from. The THRIVE recommendations and canons were our way of stepping out of the boat to develop the spirit of koinonia. The THRIVE Task Force work began in the summer of 2021 and was guided by the diocese's vision, mission, and value statements. The task force's work was to develop a roadmap and timeline for reinvigorating and energizing the diocese and its congregations to engage in new ways to serve, worship, care for creation, and foster conciliation and reconciliation across our state. And I should have said that also, in case you don't know, because sometimes people don't know where it is. I'm trying to put something in the chat. All right. Mission, vision statement there, and value statement is in the chat. The task force was invited to explore opportunities for invigorated mission and ministry in the diocese, to be creative and to think outside of the box, or outside of the boat, as it were. The work of the task force was divided into 3 areas. One was to discern a path or paths to long-term financial sustainability. 2, to discern creative and innovative ways to revitalize mission in our congregations and dioceses. And lastly, discern potential models of collaborative governance and leadership within the Diocese of Vermont, including our parishes and missions, and in relation to the Diocese of New Hampshire and Maine. Thrive gave us canons that were especially meant to increase connection and flow of information, break down silos to make for more effective and accountable governance, and have a command of our financial health. We are at the end of the experimental period agreed upon for the Thrive canons adopted in 22, sorry. A few of the canons were amended in 2023 to better define the new role and authority of the Executive Council and the authority of the bishop. But now, this year, all of the Thrive canons are to be adopted or allowed to sunset. And if they sunset, we revert to the structures and organizations of 3 or more years ago. So as with any real experimentation, there should be an assessment to determine what was learned and how that learning is to be used. To this end, a Thrive assessment report was generated from an assessment of the canons, which came from the result of 6 governing bodies and 4 entities that participated in a process of reviewing the experimental canons, which came from the Thrive recommendations. The report suggests how we should proceed with our experimental canons and is the rationale, in a sense, for the sunsetting, changes, or adoptions of the Thrive canons being presented to the convention by the Executive Council. From this 3-year period of experimentation and the committee's responses, we can conclude that overall, the Thrive structure and canons seem to be working for our diocesan household. There's very little that the diocesan bodies and leaders recommend we revise in the canons. And I want to offer you the highlights of this report, which will impact our voting. One item is create new seats on council for the chairperson or representative of the Racial Healing and Justice Committee, and for representation of the leadership involved with creation care. We currently have people doing this work who have a seat on Executive Council. However, they wear multiple hats and bring knowledge of multiple entities. For example, CJ Spirito, I think he wears like 3, 4 hats. He wears a bunch of hats. But anyway, we do not at this time have specifically named seats on council, signifying the importance of the work, some of the work that we've named. And if we value the work of racial healing and justice and that of creation care, this needs to be represented in our work, not just by a person who is wearing several hats already. The Commission on Missional Vitality, the next item is the Commission on Missional Vitality and Committee on Congregational Development and Formation, which we used to call CCDF, will sunset, and we will go back to the Commission on Ministry, returning to that body all the attendant responsibilities of a Commission on Ministry as required by the Episcopal Church canons. And then lastly, the Advisory Commission on Diocesan Organizations, which did not meet during the 3-year period, will also sunset. When they met for the assessment process, their focus was more on the canons related to their individual entities, and they submitted requests for canonical changes. In place of a structured commission, the directors of the diocesan entities will be invited twice a year to update Executive Council. Not mentioned in the assessment report, but a necessary action for us to take is to repeal Canon 38, meaning we will not resurrect mission districts. At the business session, in my convention address, I will talk more about the findings of the assessment report and how they will shape our work moving forward. So now I'd like to turn things back over to, I don't know if it's Tom that will go next or Anne is going to have Tom go next. I'm finished. That's it.
Okay. So I'm not sure, Sophie, are you going to play the video or should we ask Tom to be available to answer questions about the Thrive canons?
The video is ready, and then we will move into questions
Good.
about the Thrive
Good.
canons.
Thanks, Sophie.
Good evening. And this is Tom Little here. I am a member of the Diocesan Canons Committee. I also serve as Chancellor to the Bishop and to the Diocese. The other members of the Canons Committee are Steve Marshall, the Chair, Lindsay Huddle, the Reverend Bram Kranichfeld, and the Reverend Walter Brownridge. And we have had plenty of work to do in the last month or so because we have a series of proposed canon changes to the diocesan canons that we've been working on together with the groups who have brought them to us, who have proposed them. And we have done our diligence and done our research and have come to a consensus that we think accurately reflects the intention of the proposers. And these canon changes are being proposed by the Canons Committee itself. And one of the reasons for that is that under our existing canons, if the Canons Committee itself is proposing a canonical change and the convention agrees and approves it, the canonical change will go into effect right away. Whereas under our canons, if someone else, delegate to convention or another diocesan body, proposes it and convention approves it, it has to lay over for 1 year and has to be reapproved by the convention that following year. So for these canonical changes, the consensus is that these are in good shape and they're important and they should go into effect when we adjourn our 2025 diocesan convention. And the text of these proposals is available to you on the website and in your other resource materials as someone who will be attending convention. I'll start with an overview of what we are calling canonical amendments to the Thrive canon changes. Those were changes that were very substantial and made in 2022. We call them Thrive changes because there was an intensive and fairly lengthy study task force known as Thrive, which recommended those changes to different parts of our diocesan governance, the various governing bodies and their relationships to one another and to convention. We made some very important corrections to portions of those changes at the 2023 convention. And importantly, when we adopted the Thrive changes in 2022, we included a sunset on all of those changes. And by sunset, I mean that they were expressly going to go out of existence and revert to the prior version of the canons at the end of 2025, unless the convention took further action. And the purpose for that was to make sure that we maintained focus on those changes, paid attention to how well they were working or what needed to be adjusted for them to work as intended. So one of the changes I'll be talking about and that you'll hear more about at the pre-convention hearing and at convention is a change to that sunset provision, which is in the current canon 38. If we don't change that sunset provision, then all of those changes that we do want to keep would disappear and we'd have to start all over with them. So that's the so-called Thrive canon changes. Those are changes to canons 6.1, 15.3, 18, 27, and 29E and 38. The next set of proposals are being referred to as the distressed congregation proposed canonical changes. These look at existing canons that deal with how a congregation can come into existence, either as a mission or as a parish, and what can happen during the lifetime of a mission or a parish, including how it could stop being a mission or a parish. The current canons don't go into, I guess we've learned, sufficient detail in that respect, and a lot of, I think, good work has been done to describe ways that parishes and congregations, missions in distress can go through a process, a renewal process or a reinvigoration process to see if they can become more vibrant and active and successful. They deal with how a mission is established, how a mission can become a parish, or ultimately how a mission may be dissolved. They deal with how a parish in distress could be placed under review for reinvigoration and renewal, how it might be transformed into a mission status, and the canon proposal for those changes goes into considerable fine detail about all of that. And those are revisions to canons 13, 14, 15, and 15A. The next grouping of proposed canon changes is to canon 29C. Canon 29C is an existing canon that establishes the Rock Point Commons Board, which has been in place for some time now as a very active board. Its purview is over the lands and the various functions at Rock Point. It functions in concert with or in collaboration with the other diocesan entities at Rock Point, being the Rock Point School, the diocese itself, the diocesan offices, the bishop's house, and all the trails and other amenities out at Rock Point. And through a long discernment process, the Rock Point Commons Board came to some conclusions about how to restructure and describe in a new way how it is going to be structured and governed. And so the proposal is to delete or repeal the existing canon 29C and replace it with an entirely new canon 29C, which including reorganizing and redescribing how the Rock Point Commons Board would function, and it will be as a nonprofit corporation. It introduces the stewardship covenant concept. There would be a Rock Point Commons Stewardship Council, which would be comprised of the Rock Point School, the Rock Point Commons, and the diocese, which would involve collaborations with the trustees of the diocese, with Bishop Shannon, and so forth. The stewardship covenant would look closely at how best to achieve the goals for the lands and amenities and resources at Rock Point. It would make recommendations to Executive Council and to the bishop for policies governing those lands. It would work in collaboration as well with the holder of the permanent covenant on the land that is preserving it from development. There would be representatives from that group who would be non-voting members of this effort. The stewardship covenant would be able to recommend those policies, including assessments on the members of the covenant group to make monetary contributions to further the efforts of the work at Rock Point. Together with 29C, there is an addendum that you will see that makes changes throughout all of the canons. So where the canons currently refer to the Rock Point Commons Board, it would now, if this is adopted, refer to Rock Point Commons Incorporated as a nonprofit corporation. So that's all that is going on in that one. These are very detailed changes, however, and this has been my summary of the proposals from the Canons Committee for canonical changes. Will be available for questions and comments. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you at convention.
Thank you, Tom. At this point, if there is anyone who has a question about the initial one, the Thrive Canons revision, please raise your hand and you'll be recognized to speak. So I see Dave Fredrickson. You can.
Great, thank you. So forgive me if I missed this either in the bishop's presentation or Tom's, but these are permanent. These are permanent changes to the canons, right? These are not subject to sunsetting again. Is that correct? Okay, I see. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Just wanted to verify that. Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, so we can move on, and I'm wondering if Dean Greta Getline is on the call yet. She is due to speak about the canons 13 to 15 revisions, and if she's here, I invite her now to get herself unmuted. If she isn't, I told her I would switch and we'll do the.
I'm
Okay.
here.
Oh,
I'm
you
here,
are
Ann.
here. Great,
Yep,
great.
I couldn't speak while you were speaking, so I was waiting for you to stop so I could say that I was here.
Okay, and Sarah Cowan also, both of you, I think, will have an opportunity to explain this and answer questions. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ann. So this is regarding the proposed revisions to canons 13, 14, and 15, and adding canon 15A. What you have, if you've read it already, you have an explanation of sort of how this came about, but basically there was a task force formed through Executive Council at the request of the bishop and in a conversation with Executive Council to talk about the fact that our canons don't address at all what happens when a parish, what happens when a mission isn't doing so well, and what do we do about that? And indeed, there was nothing in our canons to really talk us through sort of a process around that. How do we assist missions? What happens when they close? What happens when they don't close and become a parish again? All of that kind of stuff. And so this small group was formed to work on this. And I'm not going to say the names because I'm going to leave somebody out, and I don't want to do that. It was largely volunteers from the Commission on Finance, as well as trustees. And we were led by Canon Susan in our work. Early on, we realized that we needed to talk about what vitality is. How do we know when a parish is healthy? And so we did some research, members of the group did some research and brought some information back to the group. And together we created, in the end, a list of what we believe are vital characteristics of a vital parish, I should say, characteristics of a vital parish. And they are listed in the canons now, the proposed canons, and you can see them there. So from there, we turn to, well, what happens if somebody's not meeting, doesn't display these characteristics, if a parish is not sort of finding themselves able to meet one or more of these things. And we had long and lengthy conversations about is there a scorecard? Like, how many do you have to be failing to, we didn't want to go down a road of negativity. So we were trying to frame everything from a positive standpoint. So we began to cast about with other dioceses to see how are they handling these things in their canons. And we found some dioceses that were very, really only focused on when a church closes, we do these things. But one diocese in particular, which is the Diocese of Western Massachusetts, and if any of you are from there, hurrah for Western Massachusetts, has a lovely part of their canons around working with mission parishes that may not be displaying as much vitality as they would like to be. And so what we created here is largely cribbed from their canons, which are very positively focused. And so you'll see in the canons that it talks about a group sort of blessed by Executive Council to work alongside parishes who choose to enter that process of renewal, not closure. It's a process of renewal to work together and for a period of time to ideally help parishes to think carefully about sort of who they are and are there ways to sort of create more vitality in their system. And then we also addressed sort of, so what happens if that doesn't work and a parish needs to close? And so we had nothing that addressed sort of what's the process for that or what happens when a parish closes. So these canons, we think, address that as well. What I want to say to you overall is that we were very firm that we wanted language to be positive and not negative, that being a mission is not a punishment, but an opportunity. And entering into the process of renewal is a deeper opportunity to grow in our walk with God. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to put anything on top of that.
I think you've said it all, Greta. The one point I would like to bring out is, and you mentioned it, is if a parish is moved into the mission status, then in this canon proposal, there will be a group that's represented by both the parish or the mission at that point, as well as other diocesan leaders that are that are relevant to the situation, I guess would be the way to put it. And the wording is outlined in the canon. So it is meant to be a process where there will be support and help, and with the desire to make that mission vital again, or meet the terms of vitality. The other piece, however, is, well, what happens if that doesn't happen? And what we also learned is there was no clear way that we, particularly the bishop, could intervene in a situation where we needed to close. And so that also is outlined here. So we're hoping this will be positive, but we also had to recognize that there are times when we have to intervene.
Thank you. Oop.
You see that there is a question being raised by Susan McGarry. If you could unmute her.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
I'll also try to put my face in there somehow. I have two questions because I'm confused by some of the language, and the second question is not a confusion question, it's different. But the first one is, as we go from Canon 15 to 15A, I'm concerned that in the life of a congregation, a year is not very long. And I'm not clear if within a year, a mission has to choose to pursue a process of renewal or make complete progress in the process of renewal, and or does it just have to get an action plan within a year so it can begin the process? Because that, especially since made progress in or chosen to pursue, kind of confused me as they're used in the same sentence. So could someone clarify that? What is involved in this year? Because as I said, having served a number of congregations for 40 years, a year in church life is not very long, especially if you're working on change, including introducing to people how imperative it is to have change. So can someone answer that question? Was it clear enough?
Can you point specifically to letters and numbers, please, of what exactly the language it is that you're looking at?
Okay, Canon 5, Greta, says we're gonna have a process of renewal.
Can I have a number and a letter?
Canon 5, Canon 15, Canon 15. I'm reading
Is long.
Pardon?
Right, is long. So which specific number and letter are we looking at?
Well, it's the paragraph before Canon 15A.
You're talking about number 3, number 4, number 5?
Greta, I'm talking about what was published to us.
I know. I want to see the sentence that you're referring to so we can answer your question.
Okay, it's in the explanation, Canon 15.
In the explanation.
Yeah.
Which is not the canon. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mistook that. But I'm confused by it. So let's go with the explanation. It says in the explanation in 15 that mission congregations will enter into a process of renewal and it will develop an action plan. But then in 15A in the explanation, it says that if it hasn't done something after a year, it's time to move to closure. And I didn't know if that was choose to pursue, that's pretty strong, or make progress in, or complete, or just get an action plan. What is in those
It is
explanations?
any one of those. It is any one of those things.
So what do you have to accomplish in a year?
Any one of those things. Enter the process of renewal, create an action plan, make some progress. Any one of those things. Basically, if a parish is really struggling and doesn't want to do any of those things and wants to just keep struggling along until, I don't know, everybody's moved away or died. I hate to be that candid about it, but that's really sort of where it is. Then other steps may be taken by the bishop.
So within a year, a congregation has to do one of those, or all,
Any one of those
one,
things.
2, or 3 of those things, but not all of them.
Any one of those things.
Okay, that's really helpful. That's really helpful. As I said, in the life of a congregation, a church year is not very long.
That is correct.
Because we do all sorts of other stuff like worship and, all those things, stewardship, mission, etc. Okay, then the other thing is the explanation of, I just wanted to know, Sarah answered some of this, but some of it was referred to like different diocesan entities. What actual financial resources and personal resources are going to be set aside specially for the diocese to assist missions? And you don't have to list it every personal resource, but Sarah mentioned those, and that was helpful. But can there be some good 3 or 4 good examples of what will be available for missions, both financially? Are there any extra pockets of money, for instance, to help missions? I know a lot of dioceses do have that. In fact, some churches don't want to go from mission to parish because they lose options, financial options. So what's going to be available for missions, both financially, and then some examples of the people outside the congregation that the diocese will be able to offer to help with the process? Maybe Sarah was the one that spoke to that, so maybe she wants to answer that.
Well, Susan, let me back up to the topic of 1 year. And if you look at Canon 15A, I think it's also important to note in section 1, the first bullet, it says after at least 1 year. So it is, the year is not, finite. I think it's important, and we did discuss this when we were putting this together, that it may take longer than a year. So it is not, I think it's important to look at that phrase after at least 1 year. To go back to your second question about resources, if you back up into Canon 15, bullet number 3, it discusses and describes the team that would be formed to assist. And that would include the clergy person in charge, or in absence of the clergy person, a senior warden, at least 2 lay members from that parish, and at least 2 leaders from the diocese. And then it goes on to say, with those 2 leaders from the diocese with wisdom and experience in congregational development. So what we envisioned there was not a specific person or office or position. It would depend on the specifics around that particular situation. So it could be a trustee if we've got real estate issues. It could be, a ministry type person. If it could be, it's not always going to be the same people. So I don't know if that answers your question as far as the financial support. That is not addressed in the canon. And Greta, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure we really brought up financial support.
We didn't talk about that specifically, and that's not really the idea. Is not just to throw money at missions. It's to really, really talk more about developing a congregation and developing a parish. But the same money that is available to everyone through grants is available to missions in this diocese. Missions don't have any less availability to that money than anywhere else. So if part of the action plan is to develop a new program in response to a great need in the local community, that parish, that mission can apply for a grant to support that work. So but throwing money at missions is not really sort of part of what we had talked about, and nor is it really a necessarily a sustainable answer to the problem. But for new programs, just like currently for every parish in the diocese, if you're implementing something exciting and new, or you're trying to lift up something that you're already doing, that grant money is available to you. You just have to apply.
Okay, thank you both.
You're welcome, Susan.
I believe James Grace was next with a hand raised with a question to ask, and then Tom Little.
Hi, yes, I would actually defer to Tom since I suspect he might have a comment on what has already been shared versus a question.
Okay, thanks, James. I would just note that in the existing mission canon 15, under the current diocesan canons, the bishop may establish and dissolve missions upon such terms as the bishop may deem advisable with the consent of the executive council. One of the important things that this proposal does is provide more process for that, and some guidance for missions for the bishop and for the rest of the church in the diocese, which I think is a real good thing. But the dissolution of a mission has been in our canons for over 100 years. Thanks.
So my question, I hope, is not from too much of a place of ignorance, but I think it's to Greta. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about why this matters, or the distinction between a mission and a parish, and what's at stake in that distinction. And like I said, I think I'm coming at this probably from more ignorance than many in the room, but it would be helpful to have a little bit of context, I think.
Thank you, James. I will attempt to answer this question, but then Sarah or the bishop or Tom might want to jump in as well. In every diocese, we sort of uses this distinction between parishes and missions, mostly in the same way. And in general, a mission is a parish that is it's a little bit different for each parish, but maybe can't support a clergy person at all. So it doesn't have the ability to have a clergy person on staff or even supply. Perhaps is not financially sustainable, or is only financially sustainable because they're overspending their endowment and will run out of money inside of a certain period of time. Those are probably the two sort of clearest examples, or only has like sort of 4 people left in the congregation, which does not really a congregation make. And so those are some of the various reasons why a parish might be a mission. But there are also missions that start and end as missions that are either temporary or permanent missions that are slightly different than sort of the parish model. For example, if Episcopal Service Corps was going to come into Vermont and start a service thing here on a more permanent basis, congregate housing, service into the community, the bishop might say, I'm going to make you a mission of the Episcopal Diocese of Vermont because I believe strongly in what you're doing, and we will support you in any way we can. That's a different kind of mission. But for parishes, to be a mission is usually tied around finances and or personnel and numbers. So, for example, in my former parish in a different state, different diocese, I was hired into my position as the vicar because it was in mission status. And the reason they were in mission status was that the prior rector had been extravagantly overspending the endowment, and they were in serious need of somebody to stop that and to really get hold of their finances. And so I was brought in as their vicar, and we didn't have an official process of renewal, but just so you can get a flavor of what that might look like here, because our issues were largely financial ones. The diocese found for me a priest who was also a CPA, and she and I worked side by side for 2 years to straighten out the finances. And I'm happy to say that right before I left, they became a parish again. And so, so it's not necessarily a one-way street, and every parish is going to have a different issue. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question, James, but that's sort of what it's not always a clear line, but as part of why we tried to create sort of these, where is the clear line for us of sort of what's a vital parish and what's maybe not a vital parish.
And one other point which Greta brought up was that the bishop appoints the vicar. It's not a priest in charge that is called by the vestry of the parish. So that's another difference between mission and parish.
Right, and the bishop has the pastoral authority over the parish. So while the vicar has all of the duties and responsibilities of a rector, the bishop is the one technically sort of in charge of the parish, and the vestry becomes a bishop's committee versus a vestry. Just to keep that line clear, you know.
Okay, I guess I can lower my hand because there's nobody else. I wanted to just make a little brief comment. I was for many years member of Church of Our Savior at Mission Farm. By its founding documents, it was a mission, and had we become something else in a lot of ways, we would have had to give up the endowment. I mean, that's a short way of saying it. It was a little more complicated than that. But there are a whole variety of ways that congregations can function without our having to say there's a derogatory distinction between a parish and a mission. We're all congregations and seeking vitality in any way we can. So to be able to be more clear about how all of this works seems to me helpful. But that's me as a person, not as the chair of the resolutions committee. But and also a comment for Susan: be very careful. As I said in the beginning, the explanation is intended to sort of summarize and help understand. It is not something we vote on. So if you have a question raised by the explanation, go into the actual proposed canon revision to see if that will answer your question. Okay.
I see no other raised hands with questions on this particular canonical change. So I think we can move on to the next resolution item.
Yep. The next one is also a canons change. It is the one that Tom talked about in the video about Rock Point, and I will defer to him to answer any questions you may have. If there are none, we can move on to some that are a little different in flavor, and that they're not legal canons. They're resolutions being proposed by groups in the diocese. The first is called the Episcopal Diocese of Vermont, a sanctuary and refuge for the vulnerable. And as I mentioned earlier, it had to do with a resolution passed last year And the group that was formed has brought forth this resolution, and I will ask the Reverend Canon Lee Allison Crawford to speak to it. She has been chair of the task force for since last convention.
So am I live now? Yes.
Yeah.
So at the 2024 Diocesan Convention, the Reverend Earl Cooper Camp of Good Shepherd Barry and I sponsored a resolution called Becoming a Sanctuary Diocese that asked the Bishop of Vermont and the Executive Council to create and empower a task force on becoming a sanctuary diocese. It had a one-year charge to explore declaring ourselves as a sanctuary diocese, propose some interim steps for the diocese and congregations, and report to this convention with proposals on how we might become sanctuaries for the strangers in our midst to whom we show hospitality. Well, the impetus behind this resolution last year was based on the thought that the new administration would be much more hardline on immigrants. The resolution also encouraged congregations and institutions of the Diocese of Vermont to serve as places of welcome and healing for everyone. They would provide other forms of material and pastoral support for all persons, regardless of immigration status, and work alongside our neighbors to ensure the dignity and human rights of all people. Throughout all of its work, and you can see our report that was submitted to convention as well as in the explanation to this resolution, the task force has served as a clearinghouse for updates on activity of immigration and customs enforcement in our communities. It has learned about the work that our interfaith colleagues are doing, planned for future steps, such as creating a rapid response team for anyone who is abruptly detained without cause or who has a hearing for obtaining legal residence. The task force has researched further educational resources it can provide. And it has set out 2 sets of guidelines, one in April and then one this month, for congregational leaders. The task force has continued to focus on formation, prayer, and advocacy in its work, and it recognizes that its work is long-term and long-haul. And now the task force seeks continuation of its existence from this convention. Several points inform the resolution. The resolution sets out clearly that the Diocese of Vermont will be a sanctuary. The task force also recognizes that the word sanctuary is a very charged term these days, so it decided to add in the synonym refuge, which might draw less attention. Likewise, in its deliberations, the task force realized that in Vermont, there are many vulnerable populations in addition to that of the immigrant. The proposed resolution draws attention to all vulnerable populations, people of the global majority, that is, non-white populations, the LGBTQI community, the neurodivergent community, those without homes, those suffering from abuse. For example, some congregations have become havens for non-binary folks or trans folks. And some congregations deal with the intersectionality of multiple vulnerable populations. This resolution seeks to recognize these different experiences. The resolution also states our intention to provide safety, not only for the populations at risk, but also for those who help and serve them. And it states that all will be non-violent actors. Finally, the resolution asks Executive Council to authorize a task force that will be dedicated to the work of formation, advocacy, education, and support of sanctuary until the 195th convention in 2027, with the possibility of continuation as needed. The task force asks for prayers, not only for its continued work, but for all the vulnerable populations who need sanctuary and refuge. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lee. Are there any questions? Thank you. So I hope everyone will read all of these resolutions and their explanations and get a good sense of what it is you will be asked to vote on. Next up is a resolution titled Phase Out Fossil Fuels in the Diocese of Vermont by 2034. This is another one that grew out of prior work in the diocese, and it's sponsored by the Zero Emissions Task Force. Gay and Murphy of St. Stephen's Middlebury and the Reverend Rachel Field of St. Mary's Northfield will be presenting this and also available to answer your questions.
Very good. Can you hear me?
Oh, we
Yes.
can.
All right,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone. Gay and Murphy of the Zero Emissions Task Force and St. Stephen's. In 2020, our diocese approved with a vote of 94% of delegates concurring a resolution that we develop a plan to end the use of fossil fuels in our parishes and properties and transition to 100% renewable energy by 2030. At General Convention in 2022, the Episcopal Church approved a resolution that we commit to net carbon neutrality by 2030. Then, 2 years later, General Convention approved a resolution asking that all dioceses and congregations develop a plan by 2026 to phase out fossil fuels by 2034. Why this change from net neutrality to fossil fuel elimination from the wider church? Well, to quote the explanation from the 2024 General Convention resolution, the Episcopal Church, in keeping with our following a living Christ, rather than calling to mind a Jesus who visited us once in the past, is a learning, evolving body. Thus, as the latest climate change science demonstrates, it is no longer sufficient to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We must phase out the use of fossil fuels. As Vermonters, we know individually and as communities about the threat of climate change. We've experienced the floods and destruction. We've seen our beloved snowy winters turn to mud, ice, and rain. Our state has already endured billions, that's with a B, of dollars in damage. But the path we are now on leads to a scale and types of destruction we cannot begin to imagine. Scientists tell us that if we don't change course in the next 10 years, global warming will cause irrevocable cascading harm by century's end, including widespread ecosystem collapse, mass extinctions, severe disruptions to food and water supplies, spread of disease, forced migration of millions of people, increasingly severe heat waves, cyclones, droughts, floods, and fires. Scientists tell us the window to a livable future is rapidly closing, such that if we don't radically alter course within the next 10 years, and this is quoting from a UN climate report, climate disasters will become so extreme that people will not be able to adapt. Basic components of the Earth system will be fundamentally, irrevocably altered. Our resolution to phase out fossil fuel from our diocese by 2034 provides a pathway to respond to the crisis our planet is facing, recognizes that the next 10 years are critical, asks us to join the wider Episcopal Church and commit to this goal of eliminating fossil fuel by 2034, asks that we reaffirm the commitment to address climate change we made as a diocese in 2020, asks that we formally recognize the Zero Emissions Task Force so that it can provide material and substantive assistance to parishes in developing their plans to reduce and eliminate fossil fuels and support their forward progress for completing these plans. It also asks that together we begin a journey that moves from dialogue to action, in which we face the Earth's situation prayerfully and ask for God's grace and courage to care for God's beloved creation the way God cares for us. It asks that as congregations and as a diocese, we take a clear, hard look at the science and then ask ourselves, what would it take to make this happen? What do we need? What are the resources? We see this as an invitation to plan and act, as 2 Timothy tells us, not in a spirit of fear, but in a spirit of discernment, power, and love. As we detail in our explanation, phasing out fossil fuel heating systems in Vermont means replacing them with electrically powered systems supported by zero-emission renewable energy sources. Given recent advances in heating and cooling technology, and the fact that Vermont's electrical grid is already close to 100% zero emissions and largely renewable, the experts on our task force tell us that the 2034 zero emissions goal is doable, is possible. Right now, local experts tell us that new buildings can easily be made 100% renewable, and older, depending on the envelope, can be made 90% renewable with 10% fossil fuel backup for those -20 coldest days. And also, they tell us this technology is rapidly advancing. What's true now will change in 2 to 3 years. Across the cold Northeast and in even colder Canada, churches, including those in historic stone and wood buildings, are transitioning to 100% renewable energy. Here in the Diocese of Vermont, St. Michael's Brattleboro is in its second winter of being 100% solar powered. A few years back, St. Peter's in Bennington took a dramatic step in making its parish hall 100% renewable. St. Stephen's in Middlebury is undergoing renovations that will dramatically reduce fossil fuel use. We are already taking steps as congregations and as a diocese, and the task force is here to help carry this work forward. Also important, when General Convention approved A098, this resolution to phase out fossil fuel by 2034, it also approved A021, a care of creation loan program for Episcopal dioceses. So the wider Episcopal Church has pledged financial support. By undertaking this work, we will begin a powerful witness to our communities. Sometimes we wonder why our pews are thinning and graying, and yet many younger generations, those in their teens, 20s, 30s, I'm 66, so most people feel younger, feel that we've turned their backs. These people, these younger generations feel that carry an existential dread since earliest childhood about climate change and the havoc it will wreak in their lifetimes. We ask that you consider our resolution and accompanying explanation carefully and prayerfully. We welcome your comments and questions tonight, and also invite you to join us for a lunchtime Q&A Saturday, October 25th at the in-person day at St. Paul's Cathedral. Dean Getline will announce the location at the time. We also invite you to register for our upcoming hands-on workshop, Powered by Love, on how to reduce and eliminate fossil fuel from your church building, to be held at Mission Farm, November 15th. And if you feel called to this work, please join us. We are still building our membership. Thank you.
Thank you,
Are there
Gayan.
questions, queries, need for clarification on this particular resolution? I see Elizabeth has raised her hand.
Yes, good evening. I'll be brief. I'm speaking in support of Gayan's resolution and the task force resolution. I am a member of St. Stephen's and have been lucky enough to work with her in our creation care ministry. Given that my background is in corporate finance, I was initially quite skeptical, but Her passion, her knowledge, and her research have convinced me, and I simply want to state my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Before we move on to the next, oops, here's
Mike and Sharon
Prairie. Okay.
I just have one question on, I think it's the second resolution here. Maybe it's the third. It's where we will install no fossil fuel systems in the diocese and will instead replace fossil fuel heating systems with electrically powered systems supported by zero emission renewable energy sources. So basically my question is, if our oil furnace fails, it gets red tagged, would we be able to replace that before we, if we're not ready to make a conversion to some electrical system, would we be able to replace that, or would we just have to close the church?
Thank you for that question, Mike. Obviously, we don't want churches to close. And we understand that every building is different and every situation is different. And I think one of the things that's important about both what the wider church is asking for and what we are asking for, it starts with planning and a discussion so that facilities committees, creation care ministries, vestries are thinking ahead about where will we go next and what will our next step be. When we say we don't want to finance new fossil fuel powered systems, we're just looking at what would it take to truly phase out and eliminate fossil fuel by 2034. We're looking at the lifespan of an HVAC system. And so I think what we are encouraging folks to do is get in touch, come to the workshop, start planning. We don't have sticks. We can't close you. We can't, right? We would not want this to lead to a church closure, but we believe if each parish engages in prayerful deliberation, they'll be able to make a plan looking forward to how they will make this transition. And the wider church's deadline, isn't yesterday. It's 2034, which is a decade away. I hope that answers your question.
Mike, sorry again, Mike, I can speak to that a little bit too. I mean, yes, it's in the resolution that if your oil furnace goes out, a month after convention, our recommendation would be that you replace it with renewable. We acknowledge that that would provide a financial challenge. So like Gain said, there's no penalty for failing to meet this. What the resolution really does is unlock resources for parishes like the task force for zero emissions, where we can come in and we can provide like support, consulting help, so that you can get a plan so that by 2034 we can meet that goal, which was set by the national church. So that's not something Vermont is setting that's different from the churchwide office. And yeah, our hope is that with the green loans, anytime of infrastructure goes, we're going to spend money to replace it. So if the furnace goes, we have to replace it with oil, you're going to be spending money. If we spend a little more money and make it renewable with loan programs from the churchwide office, that's a win for everyone. That's where we're coming from on this.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for asking.
Sarah Cowan had a query or question.
My question is, what happens if this resolution does not pass? Where are we as far as our current situation, or what happens?
My understanding, I can speak to that, and then Gain, if you want to follow up. My understanding is we already have a resolution that we will be working toward carbon, I think the way we phrased it was carbon neutrality gain, is that right? By 2030. So if we don't pass this resolution, we won't have a task force, and we'll need to make this move faster than what this resolution is proposing. This gives us an extra 4 years, and it gives us a task force to actually support parishes to do this.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Gayan and Rachel. Before we move on to the next resolution, I omitted something at the end of the canons thing. So if Tom Little is still here, he had a brief comment he wanted to make about a
Yes.
possible other resolution we would have.
Thank you, Anne. Yes. All of the work that the Canons Committee, together with the bishop and council and others, and you, Anne, has focused us more than I suppose usual on the canons, and the Thrive canon changes in particular have caused us to look around, and the bishop has identified some additional changes to the canons that we are in the process of bringing to the Canons Committee, and we'll be consulting with stakeholders over the next week or so. And I expect to bring that, the Canons Committee will bring that to the convention, and we'll be posting it as soon as we can. Bringing something to the floor in that way requires a rule suspension, a 2/3 vote, and we'd look for your support for that. And secondly, we're thinking about a relatively simple resolution directing the Canons Committee, once action has been taken on all of these canons we've been talking about, is to integrate all those changes into the existing diocesan canons in a orderly way, and to catch any typos and nits and produce a new set of diocesan canons for posting and sharing. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, one of the reasons we presented the canon changes this year the way we did was because if one doesn't pass, you can't put the changes in from one proposal into another proposal, because if that doesn't pass, then it renders the other one kind of crazy. But it does look sometimes like things are there that shouldn't be. So what Tom is suggesting is that everything gets meshed together in a good way. If we had put the whole canons in each resolution, you'd have seen things that you really didn't want to try to sort out. It's a bit circular sometimes. So thank you, Tom. So we'll look for that probably next week or a little after. Okay, so the next resolution we have two more. We have one titled Resist Rising Christian Nationalism. This is sponsored by the Vestry of St. Michael's, Brattleboro, and it addresses an issue of growing concern, particularly as it promotes a sort of Christian identity that is in sharp conflict with our own baptismal promise to love and respect the dignity of all our neighbors. The Episcopal Church General Convention last summer addressed this in a global context of religious nationalism and adopted a resolution titled Combat Rising Religious Nationalism. This piggybacks on that in some ways. And I would like to ask Jeff Lewis and David Treadwell, both of St. Michael's, Brattleboro, to speak to the resolution. They are its sponsors, and should you find yourself having questions after tonight, their emails are on the resolution itself.
Good evening. As Anne just mentioned, the General Convention passed last year a resolution combating religious nationalism. That was before the current administration uh, uh, came uh, came to power in January. And one of the things that they did, February 6th of 2025, the president issued an executive order entitled Eradicating Anti-Christian Bias, which takes the position that the federal government has a positive duty to protect religious expression in the public square. The executive order, however, outlined actions to be protected that were treated as violent or threatening by many previous administrations and indeed by many Americans. Eradicating anti-Christian bias has been followed by other executive orders proposing, for example, that government employees can proselytize for their faith inside their employment settings. We believe that these are a profound and misguided view of government's purpose and role, and they are also a profound misunderstanding and misuse of Scripture. The current national administration has two streams feeding it: the policy work of the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 and the vast flow of literature, preaching, and publicity known as Christian nationalism. Project 2025 is the public policy realization of the underlying notion of Christian nationalism, and it rests on it for values, claims for authority, and moral justification for pushing aside 250 years of carefully tended democratic practices and norms. The Christian nationalism fabric comprises many threads, from the very raw claims to power based on Scripture to far more subtle arguments drawing on history, theology, and religious practice. Of the documents and statements that claim to define or represent Christian nationalism, we engaged with two separate sources: the Statement on Christian Nationalism and the Gospel by Silverman and Devers, and the book The Case for Christian Nationalism by Wolfe. The Case for Christian Nationalism defines Christian nationalism as, quote, a set of governing principles rooted in Scripture's teaching that Christ rules as supreme Lord and King of all creation, who has ordained several magistrates with delegated authority to be under him over the people, to order their ordained jurisdiction by punishing evil and promoting good for his own glory and the common good of the nation. Core assumptions of this are that the Bible, particularly the Gospels, are authoritative and representative, a literal expression of divine will that cannot be questioned, and that the Christian religion, our religion, is fully finished, and that revelation is complete and final. Contrary to Christian nationalism, we understand Scripture to be carefully collected and curated words of people of faith about their religious experiences, divinely inspired, yes, but with very much open to question and lively engagement. We believe the history of salvation is not yet complete, and we have more to experience and learn. And we make no claim that the pursuit of democracy has been without mistake or error, but we believe that government, a fully human endeavor, is as valuable as any other human endeavor. Jeff Lewis is also here this evening. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, David. Well said. The only thing I would add is that as we watch the public activities, we can see an accelerating presence and claim for Christian nationalism. Many of you may have seen that the White House declaration of what is now renamed Columbus Day claims very specifically that we were created as a Christian nation, and all of the attendants that David has alluded to in what he's read are appended to that. So, as I said, we're seeing a heightened attention and accelerating application of this, calling for us, frankly, to be very strong in our own witness here, both at St. Michael's and in the Diocese of Vermont.
And let me finally say that if we're going to define this as Christian nationalism, someone needs to define what is Christianity. And I don't know that any of us are prepared to stand up and say that our vision of Christianity is the authoritative one on which it should be based.
you.
See a hand raised from Walter Brownridge with a question or a query on this resolution.
Yeah, thank you, Paul and Ann, and thank you to the St. Michael's Brattleboro vestry and the two gentlemen who just presented. I have a question, which you may think is a comment first, but that last year's last general convention, the resolution passed, yes, dealt with Christian nationalism and religious nationalism in even in a global context. One I really commend what you all have done, but I did note in reading through it, one of the issues that is clear in the expressions of Christian nationalism in the United States is its tie to white supremacy. And I attended several conferences, at least two last year, specifically on Christian nationalism. And in both of those places, one at Georgetown and one here in Vermont, sponsored by Vermont Interfaith Action, we were much more clear in declaring that this is really not only is Christian nationalism, it could be in some other country, simply quote Christian nationalism as a challenge and an issue. But in the United States, it is very much tied to white supremacy, and it is a threat to both our democracy as well as to the American church. And a large part of that is because it is a white Christian nationalism in addition to its threat to democracy. And so I would like to invite some conversation offline or with Ann and the drafters of this about amending this slightly to incorporate that, because I think that is the one thing that's missing from it. And
we would entertain that conversation,
Yes.
Walter.
Thank you.
I would say in our humble defense is that this grew out of our own. We have a small task force in the congregation paying attention to what our faith calls us to do to respond to the current administration's actions, and it's sort of been going like that. And you've added a piece to it that we need to be more explicit about, and we appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
So we'll take that discussion offline, Walter.
Yes, Walter, their email addresses are both on the resolution, and I would encourage conversation with them, and then also with me if you do want to propose an amendment to this. Do that as soon as you can before the convention itself, because we'll want to be able to put it up on the screen in the slide the same way that it's been done here.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Okay, and our final resolution.
There's a
one more
Victoria
question.
Odell from Bennington.
Okay, didn't see that one.
Sorry.
Yes.
There you go.
I just wanted to add support for Reverend Walter's comment. I think it's very important that we support the idea that white supremacy is an integral part of Christian nationalism, and we need to make that very clear.
Thank you. Are there any other queries or questions on this particular resolution? If not, I think, Ann, we can move on to the final resolution.
Thank you. We have a ship's bell clock in here that rings 8 bells at 8 o'clock, and it was going off. So I muted myself for a second so you wouldn't know how I have to listen to it. The last resolution is titled Calling for an End to Genocide and for Lasting Peace in Gaza. I apologize to all of you for not having this resolution available sooner. It is not the fault of the proposers. They submitted a resolution calling for an end to genocide in Gaza before the September 19th deadline. Since then, circumstances have changed fairly dramatically, and they continue to change rapidly. The Resolutions Committee wanted to make sure the resolution is as timely and meaningful as possible, so have made significant changes to the original with the consent of the proposers. What has been posted on the website today, and it was just today, for which I apologize, should give a good sense of the resolution you'll be asked to vote on, but it doesn't yet have the explanation. Our plan is to have that complete and put on the site by Monday or Tuesday, so please check back. Meanwhile, Wally Good of Holy Trinity Swanton is available to speak to the resolution and answer questions. Is Wally on the call?
Yes,
I did see
just,
him.
Okay, good. Thank
I
you.
got the authorization to speak. But as Anne has meant, this is a follow-on resolution. There have been several questions regarding the situation in the western edge of Asia over the last number of years, and the different governments that are there. And a lot of these resolves are taking into account what's happened in the last 2 months, and thanking people and the situations that have at least been developed to create the ceasefire, that we appreciate our delegation to the federal government for their statements regarding the genocide as a real description of the situation. And there's many organizations that have also on that issue. So it's a fairly long resolution with a lot of resolves, and the explanation will explain why each resolve is included. The most important for, I think, people to do, and we'll have a link in the explanation, is what genocide is, at least by the UN Genocide Convention of 1948. And so it's good to understand what genocide is and means in order to be able to clearly understand this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Wally. I should just note that the link to the 1948 UN Genocide Convention is in a footnote on the resolution itself. There are a bunch of things that are going to be linked from the explanation. So you'll get to see those, but we didn't want to put stuff in here that doesn't have some backing from some source. So, do we have any questions? I do encourage you to read it and then look again when it pops up next week. All right. Thank you all very much. I know this has been a long session and it's likely to get a little longer. I see,
I do see a
I do
hand
see
from
somebody
Gil
with a hand up.
Mathis.
Yep.
Gil, there you go.
Okay. I'm wondering how this is different than the resolution we passed last year, condemning Israel.
I think we passed a couple of resolutions, not necessarily condemning Israel, but I'm trying to think. We passed a couple of resolutions about asking the government to obey the Leahy laws. Beginning in 2018 was the first time we did one of those. Um, I would have to look and see, but I don't recall it. We did one last year.
Liban last year was more focused on the notion of Israel as an apartheid state.
Correct, and we didn't pass it.
We passed a version of it.
A version of it.
It was an amended version. Yes.
Okay.
What we did, yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Right. If you want to look for those, you can go on the website, and under the diocesan convention thing, it has the diocesan conventions from different years. I think it goes back as far as 2021, and the resolutions are linked on each of those pages. I know that General Convention did a lot last summer. I served on the committee that dealt with all of those. We did fail to pass a resolution based on the Diocese of Vermont's resolution from some years ago about apartheid. But other things did make their way in. Okay. Thank you, Sophie.
Oh. Any other questions related to resolutions that will be presented for action at the business session?
I would like to say a thank you to all the people who presented their resolutions and to those who raised questions. And to say this has taken a while and it will likely take longer in 2 weeks, but unless we are able to move fairly quickly. But thank you very much for your patience. They're important, and we appreciate you all being here.
Thank you, Anne. With resolutions behind us, I believe we can move on to the final matters for the evening, which means I would like to introduce Elizabeth Parker, who is a member of the Nominations Committee, to present the slate of nominees standing for election at our convention this year. So, Elizabeth, I believe you are there.
Yes, I am. Thank you. I want to thank all the members of the nominating committee for their good work. And I want to thank all of the individuals who have stepped forward to put their names up for these 7 different positions that we have. The first is the Brookhaven Treatment and Learning Center trustees. We have 3 clergy or lay nominees, and we have 3 positions available and 3 nominees. So at this point, this would be an uncontested election. We have Judith and let me say at the outset, if I mispronounce your name, please do tell me, and I will make sure that at the business meeting I pronounce it correctly. So Judith Castengay, Brett of Christchurch Island Pond, Brett Murphy of St. Mary's Northfield, and Marty Roberts of Christchurch Montpelier. Can we go on to the next slide? For the Commission on Finance, we have 2 clergy or lay positions with 1 nominee, Brendan Means Koss of St. Peter's Bennington. Next slide. And then for General Convention, we have 4 clergy positions available and 6 clergy nominees. Those nominees are the Reverend Canon Walter Brownridge of Christchurch Montpelier, the Reverend Canon Lee Allison, the Reverend Canon Lee Allison Crawford of St. Mary's Northfield, the Reverend Greta Gatlin of Cathedral Church of St. Paul in Burlington, the Reverend Sarah Ganolfi of Trinity Rutland, the Reverend Jeremy Means Koss of St. James Arlington and St. Peter's Bennington, and the Reverend Kathleen Shoto of Holy Trinity Swanton. So that is a contested race. And then for the lay nominees, we have 4 positions and 5 candidates. We have Anne Brown of St. Mary's Northfield, Luke Kruger of St. Paul's Wells, Thomas Little of Trinity Shelburne, Gan Murphy of St. Stephen's Middlebury, and Anna Youngman of St. Peter's Bennington. Next slide. For the provincial synod delegates, we have 1 clergy or lay with 1 nominee, and it's Elizabeth Parker of Christ Church Montpelier. That's me. Next slide. For Rock Point School Board of Trustees, we have 2 positions and 2 nominees, Tricia Kane and Lee McClendon. Next slide. For the standing committee, we have 1 clergy and 1 lay position with 1 nominee for each. For the clergy nominee, we have the Reverend Lee Crawford of St. Mary's Northfield. And for the lay nominee, we have Colleen Gates of St. Peter's Bennington. And the final slide. For the trustees of the diocese, we have 2 clergy or lay full-term positions, and we have 2 nominees. We have Noma Anderson of the Cathedral of St. Paul's, Burlington, and Dr. Anne, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly, Guillot of the Cathedral of St. Paul in Burlington. And that's our slate of candidates. As you can see, we only have 1 series for the for the convention deputation, who are where we would have to have you vote for individuals. And that's our slate of candidates.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Full information on all of the nominees is available on the Diocesan Convention portion of our website for the diocese. And if you'd like to read up on all of the candidates standing for election, you can refer to their statements and bios there on the website. Which means we can move forward to final matters. We've covered all of the topics that will be part of our business session later on, but before that, there is the in-person day, which is to be held at our cathedral, just as a reminder, on Saturday, the 25th. On that day, registration will begin at 9 a.m. There'll be coffee and tea and other munchies there for people as they arrive, with the program beginning about 10 a.m. that morning. I would encourage people to bring devices, personal computer devices, if you have them, so that you can access the agenda, the worship bulletins, and things like that. And we can reduce the amount of paper we use at a gathering like the in-person program day. Lunch will be provided for all who have registered, so you need not fear that. You will be provided for. And a little bit about parking. Parking is somewhat limited. It will be available in the lot adjoining the cathedral at no charge on that day. However, you may want to consider buddying up with someone to carpool to come to make the most effective use of the limited parking spaces. Otherwise, there would be parking in adjoining buildings, but some of that may be paid parking. And we don't want to forget that there is communion bake-off contest that is being held as part of convention, the second annual one. I don't know if Jenny Knowles is with us. If you want to say anything about that, Jenny.
If Jenny's not here, I'll say something.
Great.
I will just say that they should not be crumbly and it should be tasty.
Oh, I am here.
Oh, and gluten free. Gluten free. Oh, there she is. Yay.
Yes, I am here. I couldn't unmute. It was really fun last year. We did this whole the people that were judging. It was just a really fun, light activity, and it would be great to have more options for people to taste this year. And it really was delicious, the winner of last year. So
who is the reigning champ at the moment? Do you remember?
Darcy and her and their parish. In the parish.
Okay, see if we can unseat her with some new special recipe that comes forward. So
yes,
consider joining in for the Communion Bread Bake-Off. There is more information about it and how you can submit an entry there on the Diocesan Convention portion of the Diocesan website as well. So do take a look at that and consider joining in. Then the other big reminder is we do reconvene for the final part of convention, which is the business session, which will be held on Thursday, October 30th. For that, we ask that all delegates who will receive their credentials to log into the business session and their voting credentials attempt to log in as early as 1 hour prior to the start. So around 5 p.m., it would be great if people who are attending as delegates could sign in. You could then go off and do whatever you'd like, have dinner, prepare a load of laundry to do, whatever it is. But having you logged in allows us to assess the list of eligible voting members and establish that a quorum is present for the proceedings of the business session. So please do try to log in as early as 5 o'clock on that evening. I know that Sophie was going to give us give us some sense of how things will work, a little bit of an orientation on voting on that day, because individual devices will be needed for everyone to be able to cast votes as we go. So I'm wondering, Sophie, are you able to give us a little primer on how the voting process works for convention?
Happily. So I know we've all been on this call for a little over 2 hours now, so I'm going to do my very best to be brief. At our convention, we use two different forms of voting. We will use a Zoom poll, and we also use a platform called Election Buddy. I'm going to stop sharing my screen momentarily, and we are all going to do a practice Zoom poll that I hope you will find to be a fun question. So that will launch momentarily.
You should see something up on your screens.
All right, it's Vermont maple syrup, the best maple syrup. All right, I'm going to give you everyone just a few more seconds, and then I'm going to end the poll.
There are
and
about
we will
20 of you who've not made your voice known that are on the call tonight.
All right, I am going to go ahead and end this poll. And it looks like indeed Vermont maple syrup is the best maple syrup. All right. Uh, and for the four of you who voted no, I curious to hear your thoughts at another time. Perhaps when we are all together in person on the 25th, you can make your case. All right, so the other platform we will use is a platform called Election Buddy. We've been using this for a few years now, so my hope is that many of you are already familiar with it. For those of you who are not, we are just going to do a quick orientation to what that looks like at this time. Uh, all voting members of the convention will be receiving their credentials, hopefully, uh, tomorrow afternoon. When you receive your credentials, they will come to you by email. They will be from the Episcopal Diocese of Vermont, but from an email address associated with Election Buddy, and the subject line will say "Vote Now." The Episcopal Diocese of Vermont, excuse me for that typo, 2025 voting credentials registration. That email will look something like this, and the important part you need to pay attention to is this, what I've highlighted in an oval here. That link will take you to the meeting page, which is where you will have to go for all of the votes during the convention, and it will also provide you your login credentials. So please make sure you save this email so you save your credentials. Everyone will be provided a 4-digit access key. This is unique to you. Please do not share it with anyone else, as it will allow you to vote, and you will also receive a password. It is also very critical that you do not hit the unsubscribe link, because you need to make sure you are subscribed to these emails in order to receive notifications of other practice votes and to participate in voting on the night of the business session. I also recommend that if that first link is there, that meeting page, if you bookmark it, as long as you remember to refresh your browser on the night in question, all of the votes will show up on that meeting page when they are open and live. When you click on that link, it'll take you to a page that looks like a little bit like this. If a vote, this is what it will look like when a vote is live. And in order to participate, you simply click on this little orange button right here, and it'll take you to the sign-in page where you provide your access key and your password as in the email that will come to you. And if you have any issues or questions, my email will be right there on the sign-in page as well, so you can reach out to me directly. Once you've logged in, you will get all of the voting pages will look sort of similar to this. You will make your option whether as to yes or no, and then once you hit continue, and I personally really love this, it asks you to review and confirm your vote. So that way, if you have voted yes or no, or want to change your vote before you finalize your vote, or if we are doing an election and you want to change perhaps one of your choices for a contested election, you can hit edit, you can change your vote, and then you will hit submit. Once you hit submit, you will get a confirmation page that looks something like this, and you can see in the photo that when I practiced and submit for this practice test ballot, I also got an email notification confirming my vote had been recorded. So, excuse me, you can sign up to ensure that you will get confirmation of your vote on the practice ballot. Once you've voted, this is the page you will see, and this is what the meeting page will look like until the actual business session. When there is no votes open, there won't be a spot to access the votes. So if you've gone all the way through and you see this page, you have done everything correctly. At this point, I will open up the floor to questions about Election Buddy and our voting procedures.
So Sophie, I just have a query which may be informative. Sometimes there are two people in a household who are both voting delegates, but they're on one screen when they're zooming in. Ideally, they should be on two separate devices for the voting practices, right?
Yes. So this is very important that not only you can use if you only have a computer or a tablet available to you, you can have Zoom and your browser open at the same time. You just have to make sure that you return to Zoom between votes and then refresh your browser when the time comes for another vote, because it might not necessarily show up right away if you have not refreshed your browser. And additionally, what I highly recommend is that if you can, you have the Zoom call open on one device, and then that you have Election Buddy up on your cell phone or a secondary device, so that way you do not have to switch between Zoom and a browser window.
There's a question from the Good household.
We were thinking, we were thinking of joining together at our parish and having our delegation there together. We all have our separate cell phones, so it won't be a problem for the election buddy. But for the ones that are, you're going to do the Zoom poll, we just take a quorum and say, yeah, we're all going to say this to that, or is there anything enough to have services for Zoom poll?
Unfortunately, you can only participate in the Zoom poll for one vote, and in order to count the quorum, it is better if you are on individual devices. However, you can all be on Zoom if you are in the same room, as long as only one person, as long as everyone is muted, and if you mute the audio of your device. However, the reason we really encourage everyone to be on individual devices is because it is how we count the quorum. It's part of why we also will be doing individual registration-based Zoom links. Zoom credentials will come to you next Thursday, a week before the convention. And that is how we count the quorum. And in order for the business of the convention to even happen, we must have a quorum.
Right. Any other questions or concerns about the technology related to voting? And you will be getting, as Sophie has shared, your credentials. So keep an eye out with your inboxes for those, because you'll need them as we go forward. I would just suggest that in the intervening time, you make yourself well acquainted with the Diocesan Convention portion of the Diocesan website. You can really read over, study, and look through all of the resolutions and other materials that we'll be taking up for consideration at the business session. And it's really a good opportunity to do your homework and make things that much easier when we come to the business session itself. I think that covers everything that we were hoping to cover tonight, Bishop, which means I would love to hand it off to you for some final words and/or a parting prayer for us all.
Only words I have are words of thanks to you all for hanging in there and for understanding that this is, we are reducing our fossil fuel use right here, staying where we are, and optimizing the time that we'll spend together in person for formation and connection. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you all for this evening. Let us pray. God, your unfailing providence sustains the world we live in and the life we live. Watch over those both night and day who work while others sleep, and grant that we may never forget that our common life depends upon each other's toil. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Live without fear. Your Creator has made you holy. He's always protected you and loves you as a mother. Go in peace to follow the good road, and may the blessing of God, Holy Eternal Majesty, Holy Incarnate Word, and Holy Abiding Spirit, be with you now and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Right.